The future of college football is money. Full stop. And today we're going to get into that, and we're going to get into the latest in realignment. But before we do that, don't forget to hit the like. Don't forget to hit the subscribe, share, and 100% comment down below. I have just completed my last class for this term, and I am 2 classes away, really 3 classes away from being all but dissertation in my doctorate program. And let me tell you, doing this channel and completing that along with all my work stuff, that at least gotta deserve a like and a subscribe. But we're gonna go all in on this college football season. Stay tuned with your big homie, Mr. Opinion. I am going to enjoy this season so much. There's so much parity in the leagues this year, and I just can't wait to share my thoughts and opinions, and also to hear your thoughts and opinions on this upcoming college football season. So, without further machinations about all the things that I would want, let's get into it. Now, college football is talking about realignment. Once again, it's that conversation that keeps going on and on and on. Latest in the news is that the ACC, yes, the Atlantic Coast Conference, came just short. They needed 12 schools to approve to allow for Cal and Stanford to join the league, and they fell just short. Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and surprisingly, especially for me, North Carolina State, according to people who were there, decided to say no on expansion. And for me, everyone, I think this highlights the problem of the ACC. I'm not saying they should take Stanford and Cal. I'm not saying they shouldn't take them. What I am saying, though, is that the league needs to have a solid and consistent vision, and that's what you don't see. Some people are over here, some people are over there. Sometimes in management and in leadership, in my opinion, and from what I've seen and how I view leadership, it's better sometimes to just let people who don't want to be there go. You don't want to lose an asset, but you do have a great opportunity to negotiate a deal, because what you don't want to happen, and you see this all the time, especially in international soccer or football, you see this all the time where players are just like, no, I'm not going to play for you anymore. I want to leave. Let's figure this out. And you just have to sometimes. You know what I mean? It's not like one of those situations where you want to be big-headed or anything like that. No, just figure out, negotiate a release, make everybody happy, and it also gives you an opportunity to move on. Because if the teams that are left really want Cal and Stanford, and that's the direction that you want to go, you don't have to worry about people blocking them, right? You just don't have to worry about that. And then one thing that drove me mad, and a lot of people did bring this up, and I definitely wanted to chime in, what is this madness that Notre Dame gets to vote and they're not even full-time members? Like, are you kidding me? No way in the world do you get to dictate the direction that we're going and you're not a member, right? Yeah, you can come to the meetings, you can sit down, but you're not going to lead the meetings. You're not going to have a big voice at the meetings, and that's exactly what's happening. Once again, it shows how the ACC really should be a more powerful conference, but how can they be when so many teams are on different pages about where they should or should not go? So that's one of the things that really, really stands out to me as far as this whole expansion idea. And once again, the last but definitely not least, the big thing that you want to look out for is that Cal and Stanford, specifically Stanford, has asked for the help of Condoleezza Rice. Condoleezza Rice was the former Secretary of State, in order to help them figure out this situation with the school. So they have Oliver Luck, who's a well-respected AD and father of former number one draft pick Andrew Luck. They have him on the working in order to try to help them figure this out. They've insisted the help of Condoleezza Rice, who, if I'm not mistaken, she's either a professor or a provost at the school. Or Dr. Condoleezza Rice. I don't remember exactly which position she holds, either a professor or a provost. Well, they're eliciting her support and try to figure this thing out, because without a doubt, this is a big deal of where they're going to go next. Now, in my before we get into that, the next big date or time period we got to look out for is August 15th. That's in a couple days. That's when a team must give notice to the ACC if it intends to leave in time for the 24 season. The 24 season. Now, we're going to come back to that on whether or not Florida State should leave, because I did have this thought, and let's jump right into it. But before we jump into it, don't forget, hit the like, comment below. What do you think the ACC should do? Should they just negotiate a deal with Florida State and let them go about their business? That is really that's my opinion, because what I wouldn't want to do, I wouldn't want them to find a loophole in the grants of rights and get out of that, or find a loophole to get out of the exit fee. Because if they find either one of those loopholes, that is a lot of money that they're going to be left without. And you don't want them to actually challenge it in court. You rather negotiate a settlement, because if, let's say, 4 of those teams win, right? And that is, let's say you negotiate a $200 million buyout, right? 4 times 200 is what? That's 800, 100, 200, 300, 400, yeah, $800. That's $800 or $800 million, excuse me, my brain is, I don't deal in the hundreds of millions, but that is a lot of money that they may miss out on if they find a way to get out of that grants of rights without actually paying anything. So it's best that it doesn't go to court, and B, they definitely don't find a way out of it legally, because then it opens you up to all the teams exiting legally without having to pay that grants of rights fee. And you definitely don't want that to happen. But let me guys know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think they should negotiate, the ACC should negotiate a release fee with Florida State and Clemson that isn't necessarily the whole of the grants of rights, rather to do a deal now? And that is similar to what Oklahoma and Texas were able to do. They negotiated a deal in order to leave early, because they were supposed to leave in the 25 season. So they just kind of negotiated deals, kind of get out the way. And sometimes, like I said, that's best for all parties involved. Can you imagine if the Big 12 was trying to expand right now, and Oklahoma and Texas had a vote, and they was like, you know what, we're going to just say no. Whatever you're asking to do, we're just going to say no and kind of be a nuisance, because you wouldn't allow us to leave, so why should we do you any favors? And we have full voting rights. So that's kind of like my thoughts on that part right there. So let's move forward to the next topic. And that kind of, what I want to show you is Florida State and Clemson. And I showed you this chart before. The majority of the games of viewers of over 4 million since 2012. And before that, 2013, Florida State were national champions and was a dominant power. It really is Florida State and Clemson. The value of those other schools and other teams just isn't there in a very real way. And because it's not there, I don't think North Carolina, UNC, has the bargaining power that I even once thought. I don't think that NC State has the bargaining power, but they probably have more bargaining power than University of North Carolina. And that only is the reason why I say that is a lot of this does come down to money. It really does. And money equals viewership, because if it didn't, Stanford, the prestigious school that it is, would have a place to play. Notre Dame, excuse me, not Notre Dame, Cal Berkeley, they would have a place to play if it wasn't just about the money. So those things have to be taken into consideration as we look at what expansion looks or doesn't look like. Woo! Let's get to the meat of this conversation, at least for me. And I was wondering if I was just going to have a longer video about this. But what does conference realignment in the age of a 12-team playoff looks like? And this is a kind of a topic that I talked about before. It makes no sense for me, for Oregon and Washington, to leave the Pac-12 when those teams, if they could get past Utah, because Utah was a beast, but if they could get past Utah, there was a clearer path to the playoffs, right? The playoffs, I don't know the payouts of the playoff yet, but I'm pretty positive it's like $1 billion contract or something like that, or it will be $1 billion contract. And with that contract being what it is, for me, it makes more sense to be in a conference in which you'll have the opportunity to make the playoffs. Because by being in the playoffs and having a quote-unquote easier road to that playoffs, I think it increases your value much more than what it would have been normally. And another key, and also by going to the playoffs, by winning games, you will be on those marquee matchups. That's how Boise State got a name. That's how Gonzaga got a name, right? By consistently winning in the tournament. That's how Boise State, by going to those major bowl games and getting themselves out there, that matters in terms of improving your national brand. Truth be told, that's how Florida State got to be Florida State. They weren't all Florida State as we think of it now, this major brand with over 4 million viewership, all this stuff. It wasn't like that. They had to build that up by going out on the road, going to bowl games, and over time they were able to build up their brand. So it is doable. Even look at TCU. TCU was in a Power 5. They got dropped down. They fought their way back up. They're back in the Power 5, and that all was because of winning, and the pathway you have to winning matters. Yes, I do recognize in the future that there is a scenario in which a 9-3 team makes the playoffs. I get it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se, but I think it speaks to your record if you're able to go on the road, get some really good wins, right? Play some, competent teams, and then you still have the opportunity. You still have the opportunity to kind of go through your schedule, get in the playoffs. Yeah, you may win some, you may lose some initially, but over time, because of that exposure, you will start winning some of those games. It's just inevitable process. So that's kind of my thoughts on that scenario. And the big reason, I saw this tweet. I thought it was really cool. So this is where I got the image from. Big up to Austin Pendergrass. If Florida State wants to buy out, not even just a buyout, because I'm not super concerned about that. I think this round of expansion really did show that college football is about money, it's about viewership, and it's about driving the brand. Now, what other business out there is better at driving the idea of the brand being about money than, you guessed it, you know who? It's the English Premier League. They do such an outstanding job of driving or marketing their products. Even on their uniforms or their kits, as they call them, they have the sponsors and the advertisers right there. They'll put Florida State, Florida State's trying to raise $300 million to get out of the grants of rights, so they say. Guess who have that kind of money? And they've been investing heavily in sports. So this brings me back to my last thing on realignment, kind of to jump back. And I don't mean to kind of be all over the place, but I really do want to say Stanford and Cal has major value overseas. Those parents of those, you know, kids who they want their kids to go to Stanford, go to a prestigious school, it has value. And the reason why that is important is when you look at the English Premier League and their television contract, their domestic television contract is $5 billion and it's up this year. Their overseas contract is $5 billion. Now that's $10 billion in revenue that they're generating just on their TV rights. Let that sink in. Oh, excuse me. I'm saying 10 billion pounds. The only league that comes close to that is the NFL, and they're about $6 billion, right? And that's just domestic. They don't have an international following. So what does that mean? Can you grow the brand internationally to where watching football is a cultural phenomenon? Possibly. Especially if you have a 2-team or even a 1-team Premier League division in which you can go sell your rights for a ridiculous amount of money. And then we'll really be in a case of the world of the haves and the have-nots. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And then when we talk about consolidated strength, when we look at total coaches poll votes, right? Currently, you have the SEC number 1, Big 10 number 2, ACC number 3, Big 12 number 4. Then you have the Pac-12 as it stands right now. They're number 5. But in the future, when things get flipped over, right? When things get flipped over and USC, UCLA, UW leaves, Oregon leaves, then the Big 10 will be number 1 in coaches poll voting. That's why I kind of say a 8-3 team, a 9-3 team, maybe even a 9-8-4 team squeak into the playoffs if they're good enough. It just kind of depends on how it plays out. You have Texas, you have Oklahoma, who's going to go to the SEC, and they've kind of received votes, depends on how good they get. But I would argue once these teams come together and they kind of cannibalize each other, I still think the SEC will rise to the top of this number. So I don't think it'll be oranges for oranges, only because USC won't have the Washington States to play. Yeah, they will have the Vanderbilts, but I'm just saying it'll balance out more. So I still think the SEC will lead the way, but that's just my speculation. And as you can see, the ACC stays the same, and that's a big worry, right? If we haven't learned anything, you either expand, or you die. I always think of the secret of my success, which I may use on the 15th when I do a video about that. And what was interesting that I found, the Pac-4 still has more votes than the American. I think the only team in the American receiving votes is the Tulane currently. But when the season starts, the American teams always, generally, it'll be 2 American teams that do well. And I think once that happens, you'll have more teams receiving votes from that perspective. So that is our show for today. I really appreciate you guys for joining us. The future of football is marketing, and they're going to sell everything. And you could have, I would say this, college football, especially major college football, and even, FBS, or formerly 1AA, or Championship Series, FCS. College football is undervalued. There is opportunity to squeeze more money out of this entity. And I think the athletic directors and presidents have proven, more so the presidents, that they are willing to do whatever they need to do in order to squeeze every dime out of the players. And I still want to do another broadcast on the players of the revenue-generating sport and a non-revenue generating sport. I think that'll be a good episode. And now that classes are done, I may be able to sink into the research of that if I can't find it really easy. But Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share and subscribe. Really appreciate it. And catch you in the comments below. Peace.